He says for several reasons. Number one, the Earth's magnetic field is declining. It is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. This world can't be more than 25,000 years old, Thomas Barnes says. Because 25,000 years ago, the magnetic field would have been so strong, the heat generated would have destroyed all life on Earth. It was his evidence in magnetism, and especially studying the lines at the bottom of the ocean. He's Thomas G. Barnes. He still lives in El Paso, Texas.
Didn't you just say that just because it's decreasing now doesn't mean it's decreasing for
Right, no proof of it. He says, based on, of course, I could use the same argument for carbon dating.
Right, yeah. That's
Uniformitarian assumptions for all of it, right. Based on what we observe today, since Gauss and those fellows measured the magnetic strength of the Earth, it is declining. NASA thinks the half-life is 830 years of our magnetic field. Now, they measure it more than anybody probably, but
that has nothing to do with matching the corresponding magnetic patterns that exist on both sides of the rift. That's what you're really looking at.
I'm saying if you looked at the actual data coming off as they drag their thing down there and get the compass fluctuation, you compare that to by the time it gets in the textbook as nice neat lines, 40 million, it's nowhere close.
Yes,
it is catastrophic down there.
It is. The data is good. It doesn't look like you say it. It's not bad like you say it is.
I can assure you that actual data, if you can get the actual readings of the maps, compare them to what, by the time it gets into the textbook, there have been many smoothing out of the lines. But it is still not proof.
That's not true. Now, I happen to have a master's degree in oceanography, and I have really looked at this in detail.
Okay.
And it's not sketchy like you say it is. It is good data.
Could it be that the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is one of the rips? Fountains of the deep broke up, things flipped over, rocks were flipped every which direction.
You can go out there and see it happening right now today.
Oh, it's spreading, no question. It is spreading. Now, they watched it with lasers bouncing off of the satellites, to see if Europe and America were getting further apart. After 8 years, the satellite fell out of orbit, and entropy again. But after 8 years, they watched for continental drift in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. None was observed. But they said, well, because of atmospheric twinkle, the laser going through the atmosphere gets 0.046 arc seconds of atmospheric distortion. There may have been 3 centimeters, and we didn't detect it. Very true. There might have been undetectable because of allowance of error. So they interpreted that the continents are moving 3 centimeters a year or something like that, and they may be. I'm not arguing that. There isn't real positive proof that they are, at least the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. We see the vents down there and things like that. There's no question they're hot water vents, and there seems to be new material forming down there. But again, that doesn't disprove the idea of a flood 4,400 years ago. If the fountains of the deep broke up, the continents may have slid hundreds of miles in a few hours, and crashing in someplace else lift up the Himalayas. Read the books on evolution. It talks about India crashing into Asia, raising the Himalayas. They use the same terminology. But it all could have happened in a few years. It doesn't have to take millions or hundreds of millions of years for that stuff to happen.
Doesn't disprove that it could have taken that long.
Could have been either way. That's my point. Both are interpretations. Both are really religious worldviews, unsupported by the hard facts of science. And the argument is, hey, we can't teach religion in the schools, and I keep coming back, we already are. This is as much religious as this, or as much scientific.
That's not religion. I mean, you've been through this, but religion infers a supernatural force, whereas science evolution does not infer a supernatural force, so therefore...
Evolution is not a supernatural force?
It's not a supernatural being.
It's a scientific
It's
theory.
not based on supernatural force, whereas creation is near the supernatural creator. Therefore, I contest your definition of religion.
Okay, here, I got it right here in my pocket. Okay. I'm telling you, in the books, and what we're teaching to our kids in school, and on Carl Sagan's show, Cosmos, billions of years ago, evolution is presented as if, as if it is a force that governs the universe. And sometimes it's even capitalized, capital E, evolution, like it is a god. Read your books. I bet I can find it in here, where the word evolution is capitalized. Evolution is the driving force. It is God.
Oh, I don't know.
No, I never heard
Read your
that.
book with that thought in mind, and I think you'll say, wow, that's what they're teaching. Okay.
Never mentions a
Why did we go from simple life forms 3 billion years ago, when there's no such thing as a simple life form, but we're going to use their words here, a simple to complex.
Easy.
Because Ilya-Prigogine shows that systems that we think are chaotic spontaneously organize into higher levels of complexity as time goes on.
Yeah,
That's what his Nobel Prize.
That's not what this book teaches, I'm
That's
sure.
what the Nobel Prize teaches. That's what Prigogine won his Nobel for, and that's what I was trying to tell you before about entropy being an illusion. That's a known process. It's an explained process. It's a leading edge process.
Wait, hold on. Say that again. It's a process. You're showing me that you're telling me that animals in the laboratory have been changed into something.
Oh no, not animals in the laboratory. I'm not talking about animals. You keep talking about animals. You're talking about entropy here and going from simple to complex. I'm talking about information. It's information theory. It happens all the time. You ever heard of chaos math? You ever seen fractal generation?
I'd love to get you to Las Vegas, man. I can make a fortune off of you because you gamble on the long shot.
Not at all. You're saying simple to complex.
You're saying the greater the odds are against it happening, if the chances are 1 in 10 million of flipping heads 5,000 times in a row, that proves it happened that way.
Not
You
at
give them
all.
the whole universe 4 quarters, and
Not at all.
Who's going to flip them quarters? Them quarters going to wear out before you get. You won't be able to tell which is
You're
hits.
unaware of Prigogine's work. I'd advise you to read his book, read the study of what he did, and then talk about it.
There have been people all through history, the last 200 years, let's take. Charles Darwin gambled on that. Well, there must have been changes.
No, I'm not talking about a gamble. I'm talking about a mathematical stochastic process. It's not talking about gambling. It's not talking about animals. It's talking about chaos and information, plain and simple. There it is. Just look it up.
Starting from
The
simple to the complex. You think that happens all by itself with no
It's
addition?
all by itself. It's a property of information-bearing systems.
I think you are dreaming.
Fine. I think you're dreaming when you dream about God. So are you. I mean,
Right.
you got a ghost story going on here with supernatural
So do you. You have this-
puppet strings. It's crazy.
You have this mysterious process that is going from
It's
simple
not
to complex.
mysterious. It's well defined.
And it
We'll
works.
see that you get information on it, because obviously we're not getting any further right now.
Okay.
We'll get your information on
Get the
it.
information on it. Yes, sir.
I just have a question. I mean, I know there's no provable evidence of this. I just want to know if the evolutionist theory of the creation of the world is that it came from a single dense atom of energy. Well, the creationist theory is it came from God. God created it. Where did God come from? Or is there anybody that has any theories on where has he just always been existing in a void, or what happened before he created it? Was there something else?
Good question. Where did God come from? That is going to be unanswerable from our perspective here on Earth.
What about the Sumerians book? The Sitchin's work with Genesis Revisited about where the Creator came from. You read the book?
Well, see, the reason they believed that is because they had not heard me speak. If they had been to my seminars, I would have
That's
started.
not the same means that the Bible has been generated from.
No, I disagree with that, but that's what's in back to how we got our Bible.
right.
Give me a question one more time. Give me back on track. You want to know?
Yeah, where did God come from? And is there anybody that has any theory now? I mean, it's so feasible.
There is no proof of that either way, but let me give you an analogy. I taught geometry, science, and mathematics for years. In geometry, in plane geometry, you deal with just flat substances. Let's suppose we have two people, Mr. Flat and Mrs. Flat. Okay? Here they are, Mr. Flat and Mrs. Flat. They live in Flatland, the chalkboard. They have no comprehension of the third dimension, right? All they see, actually, you and I as three-dimensional beings, you can see two dimensions, width and height, and you understand depth, but you don't really see depth in the strict sense of the term. You could take a picture of what you're looking at, and it would be flat, but you would still perceive the depth in it. Third dimension is really something we perceive. You don't really see it, if I can get the difference across. Mr. Flat would see Mrs. Flat as a straight line. He could walk around and understand that she is indeed a rectangle, but he only sees her as a straight line. He walks around and says, oh, she's a rectangle, okay? Suppose I, as a three-dimensional being, would like to get them to understand me. You can't put a three-dimensional object into two dimensions. So I stick my finger through the chalkboard. Mr. Flat comes over and says, I've seen him, he's a circle. Right? The cross-section of my finger. Over here I put three fingers through the chalkboard. Mrs. Flat comes over and she says, oh no honey, I've seen him, he's three circles. Both have a very, very limited, small view of what I am. Both are right and wrong at the same time. There's no possible way I'm going to explain